Okay, let's dive in. What if you could take a company, I mean, already a household name, a real global giant, and then multiply its value by nearly 10 times in just over a decade?
It sounds almost unbelievable, doesn't it?
It really does. Think about that scale.
Mm-hmm.
You're going from, what, $350 billion in market value to a staggering $3.3 trillion?
And not just value, right?
Yeah,
The profitability is just
absolutely.
mind-blowing.
Exactly. Generating $97 billion in annual profit. It's like something out of a business fairy tale,
Mm-hmm.
but it actually happened at Apple under Tim Cook. And here's the really interesting part, I think. This wasn't driven by, flashy charisma.
Not the typical rock star CEO playbook at all.
No grand pronouncements, not even necessarily a constant stream of totally new, disruptive product categories like under jobs.
Mhm.
This success, it seems, was built on something far more understated.
Quiet, almost.
Yeah, quiet. Something many might even think is, well, boring. It was
Yeah.
built on discipline
Relentless discipline.
and operational precision, these incredibly calculated long-term bets. It really challenges that common idea of what it takes to lead a huge tech company, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
So our mission today in this deep dive is really to pull back the curtain, try and uncover the how behind Tim Cook's quiet but completely revolutionary leadership. Okay, let's unpack this.
And it is a monumental achievement, especially when you think about the history there. I mean, back in August 2011, when Tim Cook took over from Steve Jobs, well, there was a real sense of uncertainty.
Oh, huge uncertainty. Skepticism even.
Yeah, absolutely. Jobs was the visionary, right? The showman. Many people wondered, could Apple really thrive without him? Would it just sort of survive or maybe even fade?
Become a shadow of its former self.
Exactly. But you fast forward to today, and Apple isn't just surviving, it's thriving, unequivocally. It's the most valuable company on earth.
Still blows my mind.
So this deep dive isn't just about saying, wow, look how big they got. It's about trying to reveal those kind of unseen forces, the strategic shifts that really redefined Apple's legacy under a very, very different kind of leader.
Okay.
We're going to explore how Cook basically turned the supply chain into this cash-generating engine.
Right.
How he masterminded the rise of services and wearables, these huge new revenue pillars.
Completely new engines.
Uh-huh. How he proactively hedged against some pretty significant geopolitical risks, which is crucial. And, how he's quietly getting Apple ready for the big shifts coming with the AI economy.
Yeah.
So if you think success at that scale takes that rock star charisma, well, think again. Sometimes it just takes a spreadsheet.
Spreadsheet.
And a CEO who really knows how to use it. What stands out to you about that initial thought, that idea of quiet, consistent growth on such a massive scale?
It really does make you rethink what leadership can look like at the very top. And that brings us perfectly to our first big area, operational discipline. How Tim Cook literally turned Apple's supply chain into a cash machine.
Foundation.
Really. When Tim Cook first walked into Apple back in '98, he wasn't the kind of guy who immediately grabbed the spotlight.
No, very understated compared to Jobs.
Definitely not the flamboyant visionary type. Didn't wear the black turtlenecks, didn't do the dramatic keynotes. His focus wasn't on, reinventing the product itself or the UI or dreaming up completely new categories out of nowhere.
He brought something else.
He brought something far more, subtle, but incredibly powerful: discipline.
Which they desperately needed back then.
Oh, desperately. Apple was really struggling. Inventory was just piling up in warehouses.
The costs are out of control.
Ballooning costs.
Yeah.
The company was bleeding cash, and its future felt incredibly uncertain. It was almost on the brink, wasn't it?
Pretty close.
And Cook, with his laser focus, he saw a fundamental problem that maybe others, perhaps too focused on product design, had just missed.
The plumbing.
Exactly. Apple's supply chain wasn't just inefficient, it was fundamentally broken. And his philosophy, which sounds radical even now, was simple but profound. Inventory is fundamentally evil.
Strong words. But he meant it.
He really did. He understood deeply that every unsold product sitting there wasn't just wasted money. It was a risk,
Yeah.
a liability, a huge opportunity cost for what that money could be doing instead.
And the transformation he kicked off was, well, it was almost immediate and incredibly profound. He just went to work. quietly, methodically,
That's a
relentlessly.
big fanfare.
No, within just months of him arriving, Apple's supply chain started looking completely different.
Think about it.
Think about this. Products used to take months to move through the system.
Phones just sitting there.
Yeah, literally piling up, losing value. Suddenly they were turning over in a matter of days.
Ease. That's incredible.
Cook didn't just trim things, he surgically slashed inventory levels. From what used to be months of backlog down to less than 5 days worth.
Wow. Less than 5 days.
It wasn't just about being more efficient. This was a massive capital release. It freed up hundreds of millions of dollars in working capital.
So actual cash they could use.
Exactly. That's the cash a company generates after covering its operating costs and investments. It's the real liquid profit it can then put to work.
Right.
And this wasn't money just sitting around. It was immediately, strategically reinvested. Straight back into core areas like R&D, product development, the cutting-edge tech that would really define Apple's next chapter.
That sounds like a textbook case of turning a weakness into a strength, a liability into an asset. But, I mean, cutting inventory that aggressively, was there a big risk involved? Did it ever backfire? Maybe lead to shortages of popular products?
That's a really sharp question, and yes, absolutely, it was a calculated risk. This just-in-time model, which is what it's called, it demands incredible precision.
You have to get the forecast right.
Exactly. Forecasting accuracy, really strong supplier relationships. If you miscalculate even slightly, you could end up with empty shelves right when everyone wants your product.
Which would be a disaster.
A disaster. But Cook's genius, I think, was in mitigating those risks while still going for speed. He didn't just cut, he rebuilt the entire supply chain from the ground up. Stronger, smarter connections.
How did he do that specifically?
Well, it involved consolidating Apple's huge network of suppliers. Fewer suppliers means more leverage, more control.
Okay.
He streamlined their incredibly complex global logistics, optimizing shipping routes, warehousing, everything to get products exactly where they needed to be, precisely when needed.
Just in time.
Just in time. Crucially, he also moved manufacturing closer to key markets where it made sense. And maybe most importantly, he built these deep, long-term relationships with the most reliable, most advanced component makers, especially in Asia.
So not just transactional deals.
No, these were strategic alliances, partnerships that would prove incredibly valuable down the line. Every single piece of Apple's huge supply chain was meticulously optimized. Minimize waste, maximize speed, and critically protect those profit margins.
Got it.
So by the time he became CEO in 2011, Apple wasn't just known for cool products anymore. It had also become this operational juggernaut.
Oh, shit.
An incredibly well-oiled, resilient machine. So much so that even during massive global disruptions, think about the crippling chip shortage recently or the unprecedented COVID supply shocks.
Yeah, those were huge tests.
Huge! Apple consistently managed to outperform almost all its competitors. Look at the car industry during the chip shortage. Huge production halts. Apple, while not totally immune, navigated it way better. Fewer visible disruptions.
That's amazing.
And today, the financial impact of these operations is just staggering. This invisible engine, right, powered by Cook's discipline, contributes to over $100 billion in free cash flow every year.
$100 billion just from operations.
That's bigger than the GDP of some whole countries. And here's the thing. Most people still don't talk about it. They see the iPhones, the AirPods, the beautiful stores. But behind all that shiny stuff is this invisible, relentlessly efficient engine, built by the quiet brilliance of supply chain engineering.
It really is striking, isn't it? How something that sounds so, well, boring, like supply chain management, became such a powerful, silent driver of Apple's success. It makes you wonder, where else could that kind of unglamorous discipline be the most powerful force? Maybe in our own work or lives.
It's a great question. It really highlights how that foundational, behind-the-scenes stuff is often where the real impact lies.
Absolutely. It forces you to look beyond the surface, beyond the flashy stuff, and into the structures that actually enable success. And Cook clearly understood that even an operational powerhouse, as strong as Apple's supply chain was, needed more than just one engine to rely on.
Definitely.
Which brings us to our second major point, the diversification masterstroke. How services and wearables became Apple's second trillion-dollar engine.
A huge shift.
Huge. Steve Jobs, no question, built Apple's empire on groundbreaking hardware. The Mac, the iPod, the iPhone, these were physical things that changed everything.
Defined eras.
Right. But when Cook took over in 2011, you had this incredible legacy, but also, like you said, a significant risk. Over 70% of Apple's revenue was still coming straight from the iPhone.
A golden goose, but a single one.
Exactly. A modern-day goldmine, yes, but critically, a single point of failure. Cook, with that operational mindset, saw the vulnerability. One big hiccup in smartphone sales, one major shift in what consumers want, and boom, the whole growth engine could stall. Or worse.
Flip-flops even.
So he understood that fundamental business truth, real lasting empires, aren't built on just one product, no matter how successful it is. You need multiple pillars.
And so with that understanding, he very quietly started reshaping Apple's whole revenue model. This wasn't done with big, loud announcements or those splashy job-style keynotes revealing some crazy new device.
No, one more thing for this part.
No, not really. Instead, it was through a series of calculated strategic bets that maybe 10 years later would create these entirely new income streams worth hundreds of billions. Let's start with services. That was a massive shift.
Right, Apple Music in 2015.
Exactly. 2015, Apple Music launches. They jump into a space that was already super crowded. Spotify, YouTube, established players everywhere.
Lots of skepticism then, too, I remember.
Oh, yeah, loads of skepticism. People questioned if Apple could really compete, especially since the first version wasn't, perfect. But Cook saw the long game. He knew music was just the start. The real power wasn't just the service itself. It was Apple's unique ecosystem.
Okay, so what was that strategic advantage they had over someone like Spotify? Was it just having more devices out there, or was it deeper?
It was much deeper. Apple had this secret weapon, really. It's a massive ecosystem. Over 1 billion active devices already out there.
1 billion?
All linked by that single Apple ID. So each new service they launch could be plugged seamlessly into this existing network. Pre-installed, frictionless, perfectly synced with your Apple ID, your payment info, your preferences.
Made it incredibly easy to just say yes.
Incredibly easy for people already in the Apple world. And over the next few years, they just meticulously rolled out this whole suite of services. Apple TV Plus for original shows, Apple Arcade for games, News Plus X, Fitness Plus X, and then the really foundational stuff like Apple Pay and iCloud for payments, privacy, convenience.
Building blocks.
Exactly. Each one on its own might have seemed modest at first, but over time, all those little microtransactions, the monthly fees, the in-app buys, the transaction cuts, they started to add up, accumulating into serious revenue.
How serious are we talking?
By 2024, Apple's services business alone was generating over $85 billion a year.
$85 billion, just from services.
And here's the kicker. The profit margins on services were nearly double what they made on hardware, so incredibly lucrative.
Yeah.
But Cook didn't stop there. He also strategically made Apple the undisputed king of wearables, a category that, frankly, barely existed before he focused on it.
Right, the Apple Watch.
Apple Watch 2015. That also got mixed reviews initially. A lot of analysts, consumers, they weren't sure what its potential was, just another gadget. Early versions were a bit clunky. Its main purpose wasn't immediately obvious to everyone.
Felt a bit like a solution looking for a problem at first.
Kind of, but Cook made this fundamental bet, not just on tech, but on health and convenience. He brilliantly positioned the watch not just as an accessory, but as this indispensable personal health assistant.
That was the key shift, wasn't it? The health focus.
Absolutely. Continuous heart monitoring, fitness tracking, sleep analysis, those critical emergency alerts like fall detection, that transformed it from a niche gadget into something essential for daily life.
You hear stories all the time about it saving lives.
Countless stories. And then, of course, AirPods in 2016.
Which everyone made fun of at first.
They did, those little white sticks. But what started as simple wireless earbuds, just transformed wireless audio, became a global cultural phenomenon.
Everywhere.
It wasn't just about the sound, it was the effortless pairing, the seamless switching between devices, that distinctive look. It changed how people listen, make calls, interact with their phones on the go.
Totally.
So together, the Apple Watch and AirPods created this wearables category that's now worth over $40 billion annually.
40 billion just from those two product lines.
Put that in perspective, that's bigger than the entire revenue of companies like Nike or Netflix.
That's insane.
So by 2025, Apple had done what few thought possible. They significantly cut their reliance on the iPhone down to around 50% of total revenue, while simultaneously growing the whole business massively into these new categories with huge potential.
Incredible diversification.
And it wasn't luck. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate long-term strategy. And these new revenue stream services, wearables, they're not just profitable. They're recurring. They're sticky. They're high margin.
They lock people in a good way.
Exactly. They build habit, loyalty, huge lifetime value for Apple. This basically created a second trillion-dollar engine inside the company. One that doesn't roar like the iPhone, maybe, but it hums steadily, profitably, relentlessly.
That quiet hum, I like that.
Yeah.
It feels much more sustainable, more predictable than just relying on the next big hardware hit.
Exactly. Less volatile.
Which leads us right into our third pillar of Cook's success,
Mm.
strategic reinvestment. Turning that operational frugality into future power. I mean, when you hear Apple made nearly $97 billion in net income last year,
Right.
that number is just astronomical.
Hard to even wrap your head around.
It really is. And the natural question is just, what on earth do they do with all that money?
Right. That's a fair question.
And the answer, which sounds deceptively simple, is really at the core of Cook's strategy. Don't waste, reinvest, repeat. It is a mantra of continuous disciplined growth. Unlike maybe some CEOs who might chase explosive, maybe unsustainable growth, or others who just hoard cash because they're scared, Cook has just masterfully walked this razor-sharp line.
Between discipline and ambition.
Perfectly put. He's a master at cost control, no
Yeah.
doubt. A wizard at optimizing every dollar. But crucially, he never lets that frugality become inertia. It doesn't stop them from making big, necessary bets on the future.
Because for him, every dollar saved isn't just savings.
Right.
It's fuel.
Exactly. It's a dollar that can be meticulously aimed to shape the future, Apple's future, and maybe the whole tech industry's future.
So how does that play out in practice? We talked about the lean operations.
Let's dig into that. Apple's operations are famously lean, especially compared to their peers. Think about the tech boom years, 2020, 21.
Everyone was hiring like crazy.
Like crazy.
Yeah.
Other giants were dramatically ballooning their headcounts, their costs, racing for market share. Apple, they stayed remarkably measured, disciplined.
No measure. Consider this. From 2020 to 2023, Apple grew its workforce by only about 20%. Compare that to Meta or Amazon, they nearly doubled their workforces in that same time.
Only to face massive layoffs later.
Tens of thousands of them. Apple, they just didn't need to go through that boom and bust cycle. That discipline preserved their incredible margins and allowed them to do what Cook really values. Invest deeply, in control, and in genuine innovation, not just chasing trends.
So it wasn't just about saving money on salaries. It was about having the capital ready for strategic deployment, like Apple Silicon. That seems like a huge, maybe risky upfront bet. Was there a danger of betting too heavily on their own chips, maybe missing out on something else by being so focused inward?
You're hitting on one of the boldest moves in Apple's recent history. And yeah, absolutely there was risk. Committing so fully to designing your own silicon, that's a massive undertaking. But it was a calculated risk driven by a clear vision, complete vertical control.
Taking destiny into their own hands.
Pretty much. Instead of relying on Intel or others, Apple made that strategic, hugely expensive decision. Design our own custom chips. And the result. The M1, M2, M3 series processors.
Which have been game changers.
Absolutely game-changing. Consistently outperforming industry standards, not just in raw power, but crucially in power efficiency and speed. It fundamentally changed what laptops, even desktops, could do.
And it wasn't just a hardware upgrade, right?
No, it was way more than that. It gave Apple complete vertical control over their whole ecosystem, hardware and software. No more delays waiting for Intel's next chip. No more being tied to someone else's roadmap. They could optimize everything end to end.
How did that translate for users?
Well, by designing the chip and the software together, they could get significantly better battery life in MacBooks and iPhones. Faster video editing, smoother graphics on Macs, just a more fluid, powerful experience across all devices because everything was built to work perfectly together.
And the impact on Macs themselves.
Huge. Macs, which had been kind of a slower moving line for a while.
Maybe seen as a bit secondary to the iPhone.
Exactly. Suddenly, they exploded in performance and sales. They became really desirable machines again. And that seamless experience across iPhone, iPad, Mac, it got even better. All because Apple was willing to spend billions up front for that long-term strategic freedom and control. It insulated them from market ups and downs and put their innovation roadmap entirely in their own hands.
So a massive bet on internal capability. But where else does that reinvestment go? You mentioned R&D spending.
Oh, it's skyrocketed under Cook. Absolutely skyrocketed. Back in 2012, Apple spent around $3.4 billion on R&D.
Okay.
By 2024, that number had ballooned to over $30 billion.
$30 billion. That's nearly a tenfold increase.
A staggering investment in what's next and what's it building. Well, basically the future.
Yeah.
Sophisticated, privacy-first AI tools often running directly on the device, not in the cloud, to protect your data.
Which is a big differentiator.
Huge. groundbreaking AR/VR experiences with the Apple Vision Pro, a comprehensive healthcare platform built into the watch and other wearables using advanced sensors. Cook is taking those vast cash reserves and pointing them squarely at long-term transformation.
Not chasing short-term hype.
Exactly. He's ignoring the hype cycles that trap so many tech companies. He's focusing on foundational technologies, next-gen displays, advanced haptics, new sensors, stuff that will underpin products for decades.
While still keeping shareholders happy.
Yep. Through all this, they continue returning huge value through massive stock buybacks and stable dividends, all while maintaining that formidable war chest. As of mid-2025, still over $150 billion in cash and marketable securities, one of the biggest corporate reserves anywhere.
Incredible.
So if you connect the dots, this disciplined reinvestment isn't just smart finance. It's strategic foresight that directly shapes the products you use every day. It's about betting on control, betting on stability to build a stronger tomorrow.
That focus on control and stability, it really is a different approach compared to the move fast and break things ethos we saw for so long.
A very different philosophy.
It feels more like a long-term construction project. Which leads us neatly into our fourth point, purpose-driven power. How Apple's focus on social responsibility has become, in effect, a strategic fortress.
An often underestimated strength.
I think so. In a world where tech giants face constant criticism, often deservedly, for things like labor practices, aggressive tax avoidance, fueling screen addiction, societal division, Apple under Tim Cook has really tried to carve out a different path.
It's been very intentional.
Very. Now, no company's perfect, obviously, but it feels like Cook made it clear from early on. Apple wasn't just going to build great products. It was going to try and build something more fundamental, trust.
And that trust builds resilience.
Exactly. In building that trust, they built something maybe more resilient than hype, a brand people actually believe in. A brand with, dare I say, a conscience.
And you see that strategic choice playing out in key areas. Let's start with their huge commitment to carbon neutrality.
Right, the 2030 pledge.
Exactly. In 2020, Apple made this massive pledge, 100% carbon neutral across their entire supply chain and product lifecycle by 2030.
The whole life cycle.
Yeah.
That's ambitious.
Hugely ambitious. It's not just their offices, it's everything. How your iPhone is made, how it's shipped, how it's recycled eventually.
How are they doing on that?
Making real progress. As of 2024, over 300 of their suppliers had committed to using 100% renewable energy just for Apple production. That involves massive investment in renewables, intense work with manufacturers worldwide.
Tangible results.
Yeah, like every Apple Watch you buy today. Officially carbon neutral. That's a milestone few competitors can match right now.
But is it just PR or is it strategic?
Oh, it's deeply strategic. This isn't just going green to look good. Consumers, especially younger generations, Gen Z, millennials, they demand values now. They want brands that align with their ethics.
Right. ESG investing is huge.
Exactly. Environmental, social governance. Apple's ESG-first positioning gives them a real long-term edge, especially as environmental regulations get tighter everywhere. Europe, California, Asia. It builds market access, avoids future headaches. It's smart business.
Okay, so environment is one pillar. What about privacy?
Privacy, another absolutely critical pillar under Cook. In an era where data is the new oil and so many companies basically trade your privacy for ad dollars, Apple took a radically different path.
The anti-Facebook stance, as some call it.
Precisely, with things like app tracking transparency, giving you control over tracking.
That was a big deal.
Huge. On-device Siri processing, keeping your data local, strict default encryption for messages, iCloud. They position themselves as the company that makes money selling you great products, not selling your data.
And the result?
A massive trust surplus, consistently ranked among the top 3 most trusted brands in the U.S., especially with high-income users, according to Morning Consult's brand index, for instance.
And that trust is more than just reputation.
It's business armor. Literally. It protects them when regulators tighten privacy laws. It fosters incredible customer loyalty, even when the economy gets rough. And maybe most powerfully, it turns every Apple product into not just a symbol of innovation, but a symbol of integrity.
That's powerful branding. And Cook himself seems to embody this.
He really does walk the talk. He's consistently spoken out on sensitive issues, human rights, racial justice, LGBTQ plus equality, even when it was controversial, even when it might have potentially hurt the bottom line in some markets.
Taking a stand.
Yeah. His support for things like the DREAM Act or marriage equality. Maybe he didn't sell more iPhones directly, but it resonated deeply with a core part of Apple's customers and employees. It reinforced those brand values. Because for Cook, leadership seems to be about more than just shareholder returns. It's about legacy, a legacy defined by more than just profit.
It really makes you think. In a world obsessed with disruption, Apple somehow made stability cool. Ethical branding, quiet leadership, strategic social responsibility. Maybe in today's trust economy, that's the most valuable asset of all. How do those values influence your choices as a consumer?
It's a crucial question for all of us, I think.
Definitely. And building that fortress of trust, as you called it, it also makes a company incredibly resilient. Which brings us perfectly to our fifth and final point, risk mastery. How Tim Cook built Apple to withstand almost any storm.
Preparing for the unexpected.
Exactly. People often say great leaders are measured by how they handle crises. And if there's one defining trait of Cook's leadership, it really seems to be this. He prepares for risks way, way before they actually hit.
He's not reactive, he's proactive, anticipatory.
Totally. Think about the last 13 years. Apple has faced pretty much every kind of macro threat imaginable. A global trade war.
A once-in-a-century pandemic.
Inflation spikes, those crippling chip shortages, and rising geopolitical tensions between the U.S. and China, two massive players for Apple.
Huge system-level shocks, things that brought other companies to their knees.
Right, but Apple, through all of that.
It hasn't just survived. It has consistently, unequivocally thrived. Take 2018, the U.S.-China trade war blows up.
Panic stations for many multinationals.
Absolutely. Tariffs hitting billions in goods. For Apple, the risk was enormous. Almost all iPhones assembled in China. Billions in revenue from China. It was a dangerous tightrope.
How did they navigate it?
Cook, the supply chain master, had already started building buffers years before, expanding production into India, Vietnam, diversifying away from just China. Investing heavily in inventory visibility, real-time data on everything, diversifying component suppliers, building deeper ties with local governments. So when the tariffs hit some up to 25%,
Ouch.
Apple absorbed the shock way better than expected, adjusting pricing, rerouting supply chains with minimal disruption.
That proactive planning really paid off. But what about something like COVID? A total global shutdown. How did they manage that without massive disruptions or layoffs, especially when others struggled so much?
That's maybe the prime example of their resilience. Fast forward to 2020, pandemic hits, factories shut down, logistics crippled, demand tanks in many areas. Apple's response?
Flawless, you said.
Pretty close to flawless, thanks to those lean operations and that huge cash pile over $190 billion at the time.
Wow.
They didn't lay off a single worker. They didn't pause product cycles, which was incredible. Competitors were delaying launches left and right. Apple pivoted corporate staff to remote work seamlessly, kept critical manufacturing going.
And they even launched products during lockdown.
Yeah. Launched the M1 MacBook Air right in the middle of it all, a machine that basically redefined laptops for everyone suddenly working and learning from home. That wasn't luck. It was years of planning, strong supplier relations, deep financial reserves.
Okay, and the chip shortages that followed, that hit everyone.
It did. Car makers, competitors like Samsung, Sony, they faced brutal profit-killing delays, had to scale back production hugely. Apple,
What did they do differently?
they had astutely locked in long-term, multi-year contracts with TSMC, the world's top chip maker, years in advance.
Years, not months.
Years. That foresight meant Apple had guaranteed access to the best chips when everyone else was scrambling. The result? Product launches stayed on track. Margins start strong. Investor confidence never blinked.
Incredible foresight.
Behind the scenes, Cook has just meticulously built this fortress of resilience. Holding over $150 billion in cash provides that safety net. Buying back tens of billions in stock keeps the share price strong and signals confidence. And their global operations are now so agile they can reroute production in days, not months.
Days, that's agility.
A capability most companies can only dream of. But maybe the biggest risk hedge isn't operational or financial, it's philosophical.
How so?
Cook doesn't chase quarterly results, he plays the long game for the decade. He doesn't overhire in booms, so he avoids mass layoffs and busts. He doesn't overpromise, he consistently overprepares.
Overprepares. I like that.
And by doing that, he's built a company investors trust, consumers love, and competitors frankly fear. Not just for its size, but for its incredible durability and predictability.
It really is fascinating how that quiet, disciplined foresight made Apple not just rich, but reliable in a crazy world. It makes you ask, how can we apply that over-preparation idea to our own lives?
Yeah.
To build more resilience?
It's a powerful concept.
Definitely. That idea of over-preparing, not just over-promising. It's subtle, but has had such a massive impact at Apple. So let's try and synthesize this. What do we really learn from Tim Cook, this man who followed a legend, led mostly in silence, and yet multiplied Apple's value almost tenfold? What are the big takeaways here?
Well, I think several really significant lessons stand out from digging into Cook's leadership. First, and maybe the most obvious but still profound. Quiet leadership is incredibly powerful. It proves you absolutely do not have to be loud to be legendary.
Right. He didn't need the spotlight.
No, he doesn't give those big emotional speeches. He doesn't dominate headlines with personal drama. He's not trying to be the loudest voice or the most charismatic person on stage. Instead, what does he do? He listens intently. He plans meticulously, and then he acts with precision, with deliberate execution.
Letting the results speak.
Exactly. And he's shown that quiet leadership isn't weak leadership. Far from it. When you pair it with that unwavering discipline, a clear long-term vision, and real conviction, it becomes this unstoppable force that can genuinely reshape industries.
Okay, lesson 1. Quiet strength. What's next?
Second, we see the huge power of systems thinking. Cook didn't just focus on individual products, even though Apple's products are brilliant. He looked at the entire system.
The whole ecosystem.
The whole thing, the processes, the cash flow, the supply chains, the risk maps, even understanding human behavior within that system.
Yeah.
He optimized everything, not just for speed, which is often the default goal.
But for resilience.
Exactly, for deep inherent resilience. And that's a critical lesson for anyone building anything significant, a company, a team, even a personal project. Don't just ask, how can I grow fast? Shift the question. Ask, how can I grow strong? Because strength is what lasts.
Grow strong, not just fast. Good one. Third lesson.
Third, Cook really teaches us the immense value of playing the long game. While so much of the tech world was chasing fleeting hype, chasing viral hits, chasing quarterly numbers, he was just meticulously building foundations, brick by brick.
While others chase clicks.
He chased trust consistently. And while the rest of the industry was noisy, lots of announcements, dramatic pivots, Apple under Cook just grew quietly, steadily, profitably, always perfectly poised for the next calculated move.
It's the tortoise and the hare, almost.
In a way, yeah. It shows you don't have to change the world overnight. But if you make disciplined progress every single day, year after year, decade after decade, one day you look up and you realize you haven't just changed a small part of the world. You've profoundly changed everything.
That cumulative effect.
Yeah.
Okay, and a final lesson.
Finally, and this is maybe the most personal one for anyone in a leadership role or anyone stepping into big shoes, your style doesn't have to match your predecessors. Tim Cook didn't try to be Steve Jobs.
He couldn't have, really.
He couldn't have. And he didn't try. He didn't try to mimic that unique, iconic genius. He absolutely honored the legacy, the vision, but he led with his own distinct strengths, his own rhythm, his own quiet, principled code. And look what that authentic leadership built.
Authenticity wins.
Yeah.
So, putting it all together, what does this mean for us? How do these lessons resonate with you? It certainly paints a different picture of success, right? Prioritizing consistency over charisma.
A very different model.
We really aimed with this deep dive to give you a shortcut, maybe a distilled understanding of one of the most remarkable, yet perhaps underestimated growth stories in modern business.
And maybe the most personal takeaway here is that you don't necessarily need to be the visionary to achieve greatness. You don't have to be the loudest person, the one always grabbing the spotlight. What you really need, it seems, is to be consistent, focused, disciplined. If you can truly embrace that quiet strength, that methodical approach, what incredible empire might you build? Not just in business, but in your own life, your own impact. It's a powerful thought to carry forward, I think.
It really is. What stands out to you about this deep dive? We hope this exploration has given you some profound insights to think about and maybe even apply.